decorating is truly an art form. It's a fun, creative hobby, and yet you really don't have to be an artist to be a good cake decorator. It takes very little equipment. You notice on this particular cake, actually anything that, any type of a picture you would look at using the proper tubes and with your icing at the right consistency, and just following simple step-by-step instructions, you can become a fairly good cake decorator in a very short period of time. Another interesting thing about cake decorating is that, once you start to decorate, you will really decorate most of your life. I have been decorating most of my life. My name is Wilton Wilton, and I'm kind of known as the daddy of the cupcake makers. I think the first thing we'll show you today is the sugar mold method. And sugar molding is where you're just taking plain sugar, granulated sugar, and water. You mix the sugar and water together, and you pack it into a mold, just like you would see the kids doing it out on the beach with sand. And once you pack the soft sugar into mold, you drop it out, and the air will harden this sugar in approximately 7 or 8 hours' time. Then you pick this hard piece up, and you place it down on a cake top. Now, this will give you your basis of your decorating, and from there, we'll put a few little dots around and some little borders and flowers, and we've decorated a cake. Now that we've talked about this sugar molding, let's view the film and see how easy it is. This beautiful cake that you're looking at was decorated by an artist, a cake decorating artist. But we're going to show you how to decorate cakes, and you don't have to be quite as artistic as the person who did this lovely creation. First of all, we're going to make the sugar mold method. And for the sugar mold method, we take 2 cups of sugar and 4 teaspoons full of water. And you just mix the sugar and water together like you would playing with sand. In other words, you just keep rubbing it and working it in, and it becomes very soft, like a sand, like your children would be playing with sand on a beach. Now you pack it into a mold. In my case, I'm using a basket mold. After I pack it in, I drop it out, lift the mold off, and we have a perfect little basket. In approximately, 6 or 7 hours, this basket is going to be hard. If I want the basket to harden up very quickly, I would put it in an oven about 200 degrees for about 5 or 10 minutes, and the basket now is hard and we can work with it. So by working with it, I'm going to place the basket on a cake top. The basket is placed on a cake top. I want to put a handle around it. So I'll take a decorating tube, about a number 16 tube, and just with a little series of back and forth motions, you see, I'm making my handle. Squeeze, 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 a little series of loops. Now we're going to trim the top of the basket, or the bottom of the basket rather, in another series of little loops, and then trim the top of the basket. Now next we're going to make a spray of flowers. What I have done, before we make the spray of flowers, we're going to put our stems on the basket. The stems are made with a number 4 tube and a little bit of green icing. You notice the stems, how I'm just kind of drawing them out from side to side? Sometimes if you're not too artistic, you can take a regular card, a birthday card, and copy the ideas of the artist as they have arranged the different flowers. You see, now I'm filling it up with a little bit of icing. The reason I'm doing this is because now we're going to place our flowers in position. Now, the flowers that I'm placing in position, these flowers are made in royal icing, made up ahead of time, and they get very hard. This way, the good flowers that we kind of like and they look good, we'll keep. The bad ones we can throw out. But you see, by making these flowers in the royal icing, it's so much easier to arrange them properly and get the type of look that I want to create here. And as I'm placing the flowers on, if you would notice, I'm kind of bringing them from side to side. I don't want all my flowers to be real stiff, you see. Just one side to the other, and a little bright colors for some accent here. Okay, now we're going to put the leaves on next. With the leaves, I'm going to use a number 67 leaf tube. I've thinned this icing down slightly for the leaf tube, because if it wasn't thin, you see, my leaves wouldn't come off to a point that'd be very stubby looking. You know, the fun thing about decorating is I'm only using about 4 tubes for this entire design, and for this 4 tubes you could probably buy these for a little under $4. And it's so interesting that you could decorate and design so many different things using such a few tubes. This is a 104 tube, by the way, that I've made this handle. But you see how interesting that spray looks? Now, of course, we'll just go around it very quickly and do a finishing border. And this particular finishing border, I'm just giving it a slight zigzag. See, just a little series of loops. Jiggle, 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 stop. And as we come on around, but it's kind of hard to believe that, you know, in about 4 minutes, a tisket, a tasket, we have a green and yellow basket. See how interesting it looks? And really, even though your flowers, say, weren't made quite that nicely, or your basket wasn't made quite that nicely, when you put this whole thing together, your family will just love it. Decorating is fun, it's creative, and the more you work, the better you become. So get with it and do a little decorating. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Sugar molding is not necessarily limited to cake decorating. We can make little party favors, put a little handle over the top of them, and we could also drop out a heart, place it on top of a cake, and then we would put a border around the top of this. You know, border work is kind of the framework of a cake. Let's take a look at some various techniques in border work. The beautiful cake that you are looking at is really the epitome of border work. You'll notice even from the top piece, which is totally made of icings, all the way down to each individual design. This is done in freehand, and this would be the type of borders that a very fine cake decorator can do. But we're going to show you today how you could do some very simple borders and that really aren't as difficult as they appear to be. You'll notice here's a shell border, and this little side border, and this is a drop border on the top. In a step-by-step way, we hope today that you too are going to become fairly proficient in border work. We're going to start off with a number 22 tube, and I'm just going to make a dot, series of dots, squeeze and stop, squeeze and stop, squeeze and stop, squeeze and stop. It would be kind of like a star drop border. The next step would be squeezing and lifting it up. You notice how I'm lifting it up? Now these very bright colors that you see in the border work were made by stripping the inside of the bag with a paste color, jiggle, 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 back and forth. We strip the inside of the bag with a paste color and then add icing, so we get a two-color effect. Now the next border we will do is a shell. And this is something that everyone likes to see and is probably the most familiar with. You see how I make the shell? I lift it up and come down. Heavy, easy, squeeze, stop, squeeze, stop, squeeze, stop. Just a series of shells. Another interesting border would be reverse shell. Squeeze to the right, squeeze to the left. You notice how I lift that tube up, though, as I squeeze, and I relax pressure as I come down. So you really got to let go of the pressure as you come down. Let's change a tube now. And the idea of changing this tube, because I want to show you, using the same border, a reverse shell, look how different it's going to look. So see, the idea is, by changing various tubes and using the same techniques, it really looks quite different, you see? Fun thing about decorating is the fact that you need just a small amount of equipment, maybe 4 or 5 tubes that wouldn't cost, in a bag that wouldn't cost you over, $3.98 or so. This is a little side border that would go on the side of the cake, you see? Speaking of side borders, sometimes we want to practice to working a border right on the side of the cake. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to work on the side of an inverted cookie sheet. You would for practice, but of course I have a cardboard so you can see it a little better. Let's say on a drop border, I'm going to squeeze, let it drop, stop, touch. Squeeze, drop, stop, touch. Squeeze, drop, stop, touch. You see how I don't follow that down, but I let it drop down by itself. I'm using about a number of 5, 2. Look how I'll make these little bows, a figure 8. Actually, it's really a lot easier than you would imagine. Because sometimes you think, golly, cake decorating must be a very difficult type of a hobby. But it isn't. I'm using a number 104 tube. Zip, just a nice easy loop. And then if I want to, notice the bow that I put on the top? I can do the bow with a number 104 tube. This would be the type of tube you'd make flowers with or roses with, you see? But now, here's another border for the side of the cake, but it's a fluted edge. See, it's a draped ribbon with a fluted edge. Jiggle, 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 stop. Jiggle, 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 stop. Here's another simple one, just a little drop and 2 jiggles, a drop and 2 jiggles, a drop and 2 jiggles. So, the thing about border work is the fact that you can do a cake, and by just varying your different designs and your various borders, many different things can be done. It's not so much the tubes you use, but having your icing at the proper consistency, using the proper movements and techniques. Many different designs can be made. And as we had talked about before, you saw these borders being broke down very simply, and so you can see that it really isn't too difficult to do, just making each design similar to the one before, and you have decorated a cake. Okay, now we saw how to make borders. Now, you notice the easy rhythm that I picked up. It was a squeeze and a stop, a squeeze and a stop. You do the same in order to do border work properly. And practice it first on an inverted cake pan. And when you get the technique down, then place it on a cake top. Border work, of course, leads into flower making. We're going to show you the art of flower making and see if you too can become a flower artist. The beautiful flowers you are looking at are made completely with royal icing, using a meringue powder and a powdered sugar, or sometimes an egg white. As you look at a flower made with so much creativity and so intricate, it would almost seem impossible that a person could make such a flower by squeezing it through a decorating tube. Today, we're going to try to show you through simple step-by-step procedures that possibly you too can become a flower artist. The first flower we're going to make is a simple drop flower, and we call this a drop flower because, as the name implies, it's dropped from a tube. By dropping, it's a squeeze and a turn. Now you're going to turn a cookie sheet upside down. In my case, I'm using a inverted cardboard, and with a squeeze and a turn, a squeeze and a turn, a squeeze and a turn, a beautiful 6-point petal is applied. You see, one squeeze and a turn, we have 6 petals. Now this type of a flower would be made up in royal icing ahead of time, and then of course after it dries we would pick it up and place it on a cake. Another type of flower we're going to do, this is a sweet pea. With a sweet pea, I'm using a 104 tube. And if you'll notice, I squeeze, lift it up, relax pressure, and stop. Up and down, up and down. The heavy end is touching, the small end is standing out. Let's do a rosebud now. With a rosebud, it's a little cup. After I make the cup, I come around and touch. Another cup, come around, squeeze, and stop. These types of flowers could be made, this could be made directly on a cake. This is made up ahead of time. Now, next I think we'll do a daisy. A daisy is a kind of an interesting flower, and this is where we're going to introduce a rose nail. And this is a nail where we put a dot of icing on it, a piece of wax paper. Place your wax paper. I'm using a cardboard so you can see it a little better. And this is a simple squeeze and a stop, squeeze and a stop. You notice I'm coming into the center. There is no movement with the tube at all, just a series of squeezes and stopping, and the daisy is formed. Now see, in royal icing, after this daisy is completed, we put a little yellow center in it, and then after it dries on the wax paper, we would peel it off and place it on a cake. So that's your first introduction to using a rose nail.